Hi, I'm General Jack Daly, the director of the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum here in Washington, D.C. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today for what is truly a special occasion. We have 2 electronic field trips planned for you. The first will take place here in this brand new gallery on our museum in the mall, and it's titled The Wright Brothers and the Invention of the Aerial Age. We will focus on how the Wright brothers were able to achieve something that no one else had ever accomplished. The second tour will take place at the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center at Dulles International Airport. This very large facility, which will house 80% of the national collection, and that tour will focus on the technological advancements that have taken place since the Wright brothers' first flight. We'll start the program with a video, and then we'll be joined by Kendra and Abe, 2 students from the Burris Laboratory School in Muncie, Indiana, who will lead us on our tour. So fasten your seatbelts and let's get started.
Well, I started out down a dirty road. Started out all alone, and the sun went down as I crossed the hill, and the town lit up. The world got still. I'm learning to fly, but I ain't got wings. Coming down is the hardest thing. So I started out for God knows where. I guess I'll know when I get there. I'm learning to fly around the clouds, but what goes up must come down. I'm learning to fly.
Hi, I'm Kendra Carr from Burris Laboratory School,
And I'm Abe Underhill from Burris Laboratory School also.
and we're here at the Wright exhibit in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. Abe, we've been here since Friday. What do you like most about the exhibit?
You know, Kendra, I like the 1903 Wright Flyer because it's the real thing that flew. And most people are going to get to see that today because Blake's at it again.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Good.
Good.
You guys ready for a good show?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, okay, pop quiz you two. All right, I got a little model of the Wright Flyer. Which is the front, which is the back?
Front, back.
All right, yeah, what do we call this part on the front?
Elevator.
Yeah, there you go. All right, you may now return to your regularly scheduled program.
Well, anyway, most people are going to get to see this because of our sponsor, the Best Buy Children's Foundation. Oh, I have another joke that maybe Blake will know, but 2 wrongs don't make a right, but 2 rights make a plane.
Nice. What were the Wright brothers like anyway?
You know, I'm not sure, but since this is their house, maybe Katherine can tell us more.
Yes, this is the house, 7 Hawthorne Street. I'm sure our father never imagined this house would be such an object of interest when he bought it in 1871. Orville was born here that same year. I was born here 3 years later on the very same date, August 19th. Sharing a birthday with Orv made the day even more special to me. Of course, Wilbur was 7 years older than I, He had been born in Indiana in 1867. You see, as a minister, Father traveled a great deal to congregations of the United Brethren in Christ, all through the Mid and Far West, and sometimes the family moved with him. Even after we bought this house, we continued to move around a bit until 1884, when we settled here for good. You're probably wondering how two fellows who never officially graduated from high school could have solved the mystery of flight that eluded scholars, trained engineers, and scientists. To me, it makes perfect sense. The people often don't understand our family. Father is a bishop in the Church of the United Brethren in Christ. Since before I was born, he has struggled with various factions in the church, but he's never been afraid of fighting for what he believes is right. And I think that Will and Orv inherited that strength of mind and thought. And of course, we've all been enveloped by Father's love of learning. And we've always had unlimited access to his wonderful library. Mother was a great influence as well. This may surprise you, but Mother was the first inventor in our family. She could fix anything. She'd make us toys, make little kitchen appliances. She even built a sled for our two oldest brothers, Rushlin and Lauren. When Will was 17, right after we moved back here for good, he was in a horrible accident. He was hit in the face with a hockey stick, hard. I was only 10 at the time, but I remember he had a painful recovery, complicated by heart problems. Mother nursed him back to health, and then he nursed Mother as she began wasting away from tuberculosis. 1889 was a difficult year for our family. The Father finally broke from the church, taking about 10% of its membership with him to follow the church's original teachings. And Mother died, but somehow we survived. Will regained his strength. He and Orv began their print shop and later their bicycle sales and repair business. After graduating from Oberlin College, I came back here to Hawthorne Street to resume caring for Will, Orv, and Father, and to teach high school. I have never seen closer or more devoted friends than my brothers are to each other. They have this way of discussing a problem. Now, some people might think they're having a dreadful row, but really they're just sorting out the sense of things. They're like two halves of a whole, and that whole creates a force of thought and action that can solve any problem they put their minds to. For the last several years, that problem has been controlled, powered flight. While they began experimenting right here in Dayton, in 1900, they began traveling all the way to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, every summer. They would work here most of the year at their bicycle shops so they could spend a few months with awful mosquitoes, relentless sand, and unceasing wind at Kitty Hawk. It may sound crazy, but I think that is where they have felt most fully alive. And I'll never forget December 17th, 1903, when Father and I got their telegram. Success! 4 flights Thursday morning, all against 21-mile wind. Started from level with engine power alone. Average speed through air, 31 miles. Longest flight, 59 seconds. Inform press. Home Christmas.
Catherine, thank you very much for that little opening to the show and a nice little story too. We are live, and live means that you can talk to us, right? We also have experts from the museum. We'll be introducing them shortly, right? But how you talk to us, well, you can call us. You can call us on the 1-800 number, and you might as well. It's on your screen, right? Because it's a free call. But if you don't have a phone in your classroom, then Sue, how are they going to call? How are they going to talk to us?
Well, they could also email. And by the way, I'm Sue Davis, here with Blake today, and hey, yeah, they can email.
Yeah.
That would be terrific.
Yeah, so Kendra, Abe, Sue, right? Well, first of all, like we're already ready. We have already got people on the line, so let's talk to Jay from Burris, Indiana. Jay, do you have a question?
Yes. What changes did Orville and Wilbur make to the flyer after the first flight?
What changes did Orville and Wilbur make to the flyer after the first flight? Well, one of the experts, and one of the experts that we have here, right, is somebody called Tom Crouch, and and we also have Peter Jacob, right? So let's go to Tom Crouch, and Tom can tell you a little bit about himself and also answer your question, Jay. Tom?
Hi, welcome. As Blake said, my name's Tom Crouch, and I'm the Senior Curator of Aeronautics here at the National Air and Space Museum. And I have some young friends here I'd like you to meet, Austin, Andy, and Manal. And they are 4th, 5th, and 6th graders at the Burris Laboratory School in Muncie, Indiana. I've been thinking about the Wright brothers a long time and writing about them, so it's really great to have all of you come join us in the exhibit today and learn a little something. The answer to the question that we had from the listener is basically the airplane we're going to show you is the world's first airplane, the one that Wilbur and Orville Wright built and flew in 1903. And its best flight was only 852 feet in 59 seconds. So to improve it over the next 2 years, in 1904 and 1905, they built 2 more airplanes and kept flying farther and farther, staying in the air longer until they had a practical airplane. And the changes they made were basically to make it a little bit longer, to push the elevator and the rudder a little farther forward from the wings.
All right, Tom, thank you very much. And Sue, right, there's you, there's me, there's Tom, there's Peter, right?
Yeah,
but,
Peter Jacobs.
Peter Jacob, and we'll meet him in a little bit. But
Right.
it's like we're not the only experts who are going to be answering your
kidding.
questions. No, there's
No? Really? There
there's,
more?
Yeah, there's a bank of experts.
A
bank.
Is that like where you go to and get, experts from? Yeah,
Good
bank of experts.
Yeah, so go to the bank and withdraw your own expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll be answering a lot of questions during the show too, right? We have another question because they're coming fast and furious, right? We have Shannon from Texas, right? And Shannon, what's your question?
What were the Wright brothers interested in before their dad bought him the helicopter toy? What did he get the helicopter toy? Where did he get it?
So your question is like it's really about the Wright bat, right? And the Wright bat is something that we'll be showing a little bit later in the show, right? And I think we have a picture of it on the screen so you can see what it looks like. That was a toy that was given to them. But the question is, like, where did they get it? And I don't know, right? So, Sue, who do you think would be a good person to answer that question?
Wow, I think maybe we should throw it over to Peter.
Peter,
do you think you can answer that question for us?
I think so. I'm Peter Jacob. I'm chairman of the Aeronautics Department here at the National Air and Space Museum, and I'm curator for the exhibition that we have here, the Wright Brothers and the Invention of the Aerial Age, and we're delighted to have you here and be able to show you our Wright Flyer up close like you've never been able to see it before. And to answer the question, where did the Wright Brothers' father get that toy? Well, there were other experimenters who were interested in flight before the Wright Brothers, and one of the most significant was a Frenchman by the name of Alphonse Pénaud. And Alphonse Pénaud made a series of these small model aircraft. In fact, probably a lot of you have played with the rubber band powered little model airplane. Well, it was Pénaud who came up with the idea of the rubber band for the propeller, the power for the propeller. And these toys were made in the 1870s, and the Wright brothers' father picked one of these up and brought it home to them in 1878.
Hey, that was great, but we have some other questions that came in earlier by email. This one is from Kayla, who, her question is, did the Wright brothers ever invent a different type of airplane?
And Sue, this is a good question because a lot of people come to the Smithsonian, the National Air and Space Museum, and they look at this airplane that we've got, and they want to know if it's the real thing.
Oh, absolutely. Is it real?
So is it real, right? And then it's like, and then what else did they do?
Yeah.
Peter?
Well, it is the real thing. You might have seen Wright Brothers airplanes around the United States, particularly this year in other museums, because it's the centennial year, the 100th anniversary of the Wright Brothers' invention of the airplane. While those are really nice airplanes you've seen in other museums, they're not what we have here at the National Air and Space Museum. This is the actual airplane that 100 years ago the Wright Brothers made the world's first flights. And we have it down on the ground so you can get up close and see it like you've never seen it before and learn all about this wonderful machine. And I can talk to you about it for hours, but why don't we let Wilbur and Orville Wright, the people who made this machine, talk to you about it.
Well, we've always been interested in flight, right, Orv?
That's right, Will.
When I was 11, our father came home from a church trip with a gift, a flying toy designed by Alphonse Pénaud. Remember, Orv?
We couldn't stop playing with it.
21 years later, I wrote a letter to the Smithsonian Institution asking for a list of recommended reading on human flight.
Now, we were already aware of Otto Lilienthal's gliding experiments.
And of his tragic death in a glider crash in 1896. But despite the failures or partial successes of others,
Sir George Cayley, Sir Hiram Maxim, Octave Chanute, who visited us at Kitty Hawk, and the Smithsonian's own current director, Samuel Langley.
my observations only convinced me more firmly that human flight was possible and practicable. It was only a question of knowledge and skill.
We focused our work in three areas: the shape of the wings, the means of propelling the flying machine through the air, and the method of controlling and balancing the machine in flight. And we argued and explored every angle of these topics.
Yes, I like to scrap with Orv. Orv is such a good scrapper.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Wilbur, and Orville, and Peter, and all of you, right? And before, Peter was talking a little bit about the Wright bat, right? And we have the Wright bat here. And I've also got Manal and Austin with me, but you can call them Texas, right? And if you figure out why they call them Texas, why we call Austin Texas, call it in and tell us, right? So that's your project for the show, right? But Austin, we've got these things, and Manal, we've got this, and this is a replica of what the Wright bat looked like, what the toy that Wilbur and Orville's father gave to them when they were small children. And the old one was wood and paper, and they played with it until, what do you think happened, Austin?
It broke.
Yeah, because like all good toys, like the good ones always break. So a lot of you who signed up for the program early enough got these sent to your school. So let's wind them up. Austin, you ready? Yep. Yeah, let's wind these up and see what happens, right? And this is really how the Wright brothers got inspired. So if you want to wind these up with us while you're at your school too, yeah, go on ahead, right? You wind it up a whole bunch, right? And this Wright bat, right, given to them, this is where the Wright brothers originally got interested in flying. Austin, are you ready? Almost? Yeah? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I think we're ready now. You ready? Set, let go. Oh, well, you know, and you could probably see why they broke pretty soon, right? Yeah, and we've got 2 calls right now. One of them is from Cody in Michigan. Cody, do you have a question for us?
Yeah. How did they make the plane fly for 31 seconds?
The question is, how did they make the plane fly for 31 seconds? And Austin, you've got the microphone. Do you think you know an answer to that question? Yeah, can you hold it up a little bit? You know how the Wright brothers got it to fly for 31 seconds?
The propellers?
The propellers, that's part of it. Manal, do you have any more of that answer?
The engine?
The engine, so we got the propellers, we got the engine, and that's part of the answer to your question. And that's a really good question. The first flight that they made only lasted for 12 seconds. And do either of you know how long the fourth flight they made on December 17th, 1903 lasted?
59 seconds.
59 seconds, which is almost a minute. So during the whole show, we'll be answering that question, right? Yeah. And we also have Cody from North Carolina. Cody, do you have a question for us?
What type of bicycle parts did they use?
What type of bicycle parts did they use? All right, and we've been learning about the Wright brothers for a while, right? And we've got a shot of it, so we're going to put that up on the screen, right? Hey, Austin, you want to tell us a little bit about what kinds of bicycle parts they used on the airplane?
Well, they used the sprocket, the chain, and...
Let's stop there, because those are the 2 big ones, yeah? Like the chain and the sprocket, and the chain and sprocket transmission is what we're going to be learning about in a little bit. So let's go over to Sue, and Sue's going to go and fly a bike. And Sue, how do you do that?
Well, here we are at the Discovery Station, and I have a few objects up here. And Andy, I wonder if you could tell me what the objects are, and I'll point with them. We'll start over here.
A car.
It's a car, okay. And what do we have here?
A horse.
Horse, and...
A train.
Uh-huh.
And a motorcycle.
A motorcycle. Boy, that is the wackiest looking motorcycle that I've ever seen. Well, believe it or not, these are the kinds of transportation that were around about 100 years ago when the Wright brothers were first learning about aviation. Now, these are really interesting kinds of ways to get around, but if you wanted to learn more about flight and you were living 100 years ago, which of these do you think you'd want to study? Well, that's a really hard question, but I think there are a few of these that we can eliminate, and we'll do it one at a time. We'll start with Kendra. Kendra, what do you think we should take away first?
Probably the horse, because I mean the horse, for one, I mean it's an animal. It's not really even with a motor or anything, so you can't really have
Can't really
anything.
fly it?
Yeah, there's nothing really that can relate to.
Okay, we'll get rid of the horse. All right, the horse is gone. So, Andy, which one do you think we should take away next?
The train.
The train? Why the train?
Because all I can do is go forward and backward on the train tracks, wherever the train tracks go.
Yeah. Plus, there was something else. The train track, the train on here, it has a steam engine. Now, if you're talking about flying a plane, you want things to be lightweight. And a steam engine is pretty big. Plus, you need to put something in it to burn, like wood or coal, something like that. Okay, so we'll move that one out of the way. Kendra, what should we get rid of next?
Probably the car, because the car, for one, it just has 4 wheels, so it doesn't really even have to stable. All it does is just go. I mean, it's
okay, but Andy thinks it can do something else.
Well, all I can do is really just move the handle back and forth.
Yeah, you may have noticed that this car doesn't have a steering wheel. It has a little lever that you move back and forth to turn it. So this can go side to side, and forward and backwards, but it's still not as much like a plane as you'd like. What's the best choice?
Motorcycle.
A motorcycle, yeah. Check this out. A lot of early aviators knew about bikes and about motorcycles. And the Wright brothers certainly knew about bicycles. Does anyone know why? Why? Yeah?
because
Kendra.
they had a bike shop.
No way! They had a bike shop? Yeah. Did you know that, Andy?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Wright brothers knew about making bikes, and they had been making bicycles in Dayton for a long time. I happen to have my own bicycle with me today. And bicycles, believe it or not, have a lot in common with the Wright Flyer. For example, this is very sturdy and lightweight. And the Wright Flyer is fairly sturdy and lightweight as well. In fact, it only weighed about 600 pounds. 2 men could carry it pretty easily. Another thing about the bicycle, and Blake mentioned this a bit already, it's got something down here. Remember what that's called, Andy? What's it called?
The chain and sprocket.
Yeah, the chain and sprocket. Chain and sprocket transmission. And you can see that when the pedals go around and around, it moves the chain and sprocket. Now, the chain and sprocket was also on the Flyer. And instead, they had an engine that made the chain and sprocket go. But instead of turning wheels, what did it turn instead? Do you know, Kendra?
The propellers?
The propellers, absolutely. Hey, Blake!
What's up, Sue?
Oh my gosh, what are you on? What is that?
You were talking about bicycles, so I
Yeah?
thought I'd bring my own bicycle.
Oh,
Yeah?
wow, where did you get that?
Well, I got it at a bike store.
That is
Yeah.
the most ridiculous bike I've ever seen.
I don't know what you're talking about. This is how I get to work. But you know,
Oh,
in case Sue was like you thought Sue was making stuff up. You know, like it's like because even though she's got a toy, right? This bicycle I've got, it's got the same thing, right? And like anybody who's got a bicycle is familiar with the sprocket. They're familiar with the chain, right? Yeah. So you can see that right on there, and you've also saw a little bit on the Wright Flyer too,
Yeah.
right? So, but you know, I put on my helmet because you should always wear your helmet.
Well,
Yeah.
you need to
So-
wear one most of the time.
Yeah, my mom says I should probably keep it on for the rest of the show.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
all right. Okay.
So you guys got important stuff to talk about?
I think we have a few more things to finish up.
All right, so I'm going to get out of here and go do something else. All right, bye.
Okay, bye, Blake. See you later. Hey, we have a couple questions. Mark from North Carolina, what's your question?
How come they tore up the the plane that they created after the flight?
Do you know, Mark, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Could you say it one more time?
Okay. How come they tore up the Wright brothers? How come the Wright brothers tore up their plane after they flew it?
Oh, are you talking about their flight at Kitty Hawk?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, I bet Peter could tell you a little bit about that. The question was, why did the Wright brothers tear up the plane that they had flown at Kitty Hawk? And maybe torn up isn't exactly the right phrase to use. Why did they leave it there at Kitty Hawk? And I think Peter would be the best one to answer that question. Peter?
Well, the airplane that you see behind me here is the real Wright Flyer, and it's all back in one piece, as you can see. It's not torn up. The Wright brothers flew their airplane on December 17, 1903, and they only flew it 4 times because at the end of the last flight, the long 4th flight, a gust of wind came across the sand dunes and picked up the airplane and tumbled it across the sand and badly damaged it, so they couldn't fly it anymore. But they brought it back home and they repaired it and put it back together again. So we do have the original airplane here, all fixed up by Orville Wright.
Okay, we have another question. This is from Alex in Michigan. Hey, Alex, what's your question?
Hello.
Hi, Alex.
My question is, all the pieces and tools the Wright brothers built their first plane out of, how much did it all cost?
Well, Alex wants to know how much the tools and materials cost that the Wright brothers used to build their plane. And again, boy, I can't even imagine what things cost at that time. Boy, 100 years ago, it's hard to even think about. Peter, do you think you could answer that question?
I think we can help out on this one. The Wright brothers, of course, didn't just fly in 1903. They started their aeronautical experiments in 1899. So they spent about 4 years designing and building their airplane. And during that time, they spent about $1,000, which in today's money is probably about $10,000 to $20,000. So even though that's a lot of money, for what they achieved, it really was pretty good research. Didn't cost an awful lot to achieve this great goal. You're from Texas. I hear you have a question.
The bicycle. And we've talked a little bit already about how a bicycle is a lot like an airplane. We've mentioned a few things. It's lightweight and sturdy, chain and sprocket transmission. It's also aerodynamic, and you've seen bike racers, how they get down really low when they're racing on the bike. Well, the Wright brothers did the same thing when they were learning how to fly. Instead of sitting up, they were laying down, and they were trying to be more aerodynamic. But there are a few other things about bicycles and flying that are similar, like roll, pitch, and yaw. And I'm going to pass this back over to Blake because he knows a lot more about it than I do. Hey, Blake, what can you tell us about roll, pitch, and yaw?
I'm here with Abe and Manal, and we're going to talk about roll, pitch, and yaw. And I still have my helmet on because my mom hasn't called me back yet to tell me I can take it off. But she said like if you give me permission, then I can lose it.
Not so sure.
Not so sure? Then it stays on. All right. So Sue was talking about 3 big words: roll, pitch, and yaw, right? And the roll, pitch, and yaw, right, define really how an airplane moves in 3 dimensions, right? And we have some animations that we're going to show you, and the first one is roll, right? So Abe, can you tell us, like, if that airplane's rolling, describe to us, like, what does roll mean?
It's moving back and forth. When one wing goes up, the other goes down.
Yeah, that's right. So so if one wing goes up, the other end goes down, and it rolls, right? So Chelsea from Texas, you've got a question. So before we get to pitch, like, what's your question for us?
Did the Wright brothers work on any other hobbies at the same time they were building planes?
Ooh, good question. Like, did the Wright brothers work on any other hobbies while they were building planes, or was building planes their whole life? So Abe, do you think you know?
I think they did have a couple other hobbies.
Yeah, like what? But you don't know?
Well, for one, they had the bike shop.
They had the bike shop, so, and they were really good at like, kind of making their vocation their avocation, right? So they liked bicycles, so they worked in the bike shop. They liked airplanes, or they thought they could build one, so they worked on that. But Peter Jacob, right, did they really have, like, any other hobbies? Did they, like to knit, or did they play golf, or what did they do?
Well, the Wright brothers, before they got involved with the bicycle business, were printers. Particularly Orville, was fascinated by printing technology, and he and his friend Paul Lawrence Dunbar started a small little weekly newspaper, and then with Wilbur, Orville started some other newspapers, and published them in Dayton, and they also printed booklets and pamphlets and things like that. So they were very interested in printing, and that was even before the bicycles. But one of the other really neat objects that we have in the exhibition here is a mandolin, and that's the mandolin that belonged to Orville Wright. He was a mandolin player, and we're very happy to have that on display here. But according to his sister Katherine, he wasn't a particularly good mandolin player.
All right, thanks, Peter. I didn't know that they played the mandolin, and apparently their neighbors didn't really like it so much, right? But we have another question from Mackenzie. And Mackenzie, you are from North Carolina. What's your question, Mackenzie?
Hello.
Hi.
I was wondering, how did the Wright brothers fly the airplane before the propeller was invented?
Good question. How did the Wright brothers fly the airplane before the propeller was invented? And so really what the Wright brothers did was they invented their own propellers. And later on in the show, we're going to be talking a little bit about how they did that and how they put the propellers together with the airplane to make it the first successful airplane, right? But we were talking before about roll, pitch, and yaw. We talked about roll, right, and how if one side goes up, the other side goes down, and then it's rolling, right? So then we've got pitch, right? So we're going to show you a little graphic about like when an airplane's pitching up and down. And Manal, can you describe for the people at home, like, why is that pitching?
It's going from up to down.
Up to down. Like, so if the front goes down, then which way does the back go?
The back goes up.
Right. So if something pitches, right, it pitches up or it pitches down, right? So we've got something roll. It can roll from side to side, right? It can pitch up and down. And we've got another question from Alicia from New Hampshire. Alicia, what's your question?
Hi.
Hi.
Did the Wright brothers' airplane ever fall apart while it was in the museum? And if it did you have to fix it?
That's a good question, because that's one of the things that museums do. Like, museums take care of, things that we think are important, things that we think people want to see, right? And, well, on December 17th, the airplane actually did break in 1903. So, Peter, like, after the airplane broke, can you tell us a little bit about how it broke and then how we got it and how the museum takes care of the airplane?
Sure. When the Wright brothers flew their airplane in 1903, and they finished with their last flight, a gust of wind picked it up and cartwheeled it across the sand dunes and badly damaged it. And they brought the pieces home. In 1916, 13 years after they first flew the airplane, Orville Wright put it together for the first time for a public display. And then in 1926 and 1927, he worked on it some more to get it ready for a loan of the airplane to a museum in Great Britain. And it was there until 1948. And then it finally came here to Washington, D.C. Orville Wright passed away in 1948, and he willed the airplane to the Smithsonian, and we've had it ever since. In 1984 and 1985, we were thinking, well, gee, this thing's starting to get a little tattered and needs a little work. So we do what museums do, and we conserved the airplane. We took it all apart and cleaned it up and put on new parts that needed to be replaced and got it in the shape that you see it today. So it looks like it's in really good shape today, not because it broke, but because we care for it and we took it apart and preserved it.
Thanks, Peter. Right, and he said something very important. Like, that's the mission of museums. Like, a lot of museums take these things and they take care of them, so people down the road can still come and get the same enjoyment out of them that they used to. But we were talking about roll, pitch, and yaw before, and we went through roll. Right, we went through pitch, and the last thing is yaw. So, Manal, can you tell us how that airplane is yawing, and what does yaw mean?
Well, it's kind of going from side to side, but in a different way.
Yeah, kind of going from side to side, like when you roll, you go from side to side, right? When you yaw, you go from side to side, but if one side of your airplane goes forward, the other side will go backwards, so you're twisting this way, right? And Manal, can I take my helmet off yet?
I don't know.
Okay, well, that's not a yes, so apparently I have to leave my helmet on, right? Because my mom hasn't called back and said I can take it off yet. So if an airplane's going to be rolling and pitching and yawing all conceivably at the same time, you need some way to control that. So let's go to Sue Davis. And Sue, can you tell us how the airplane was controlled by the pilots?
Hey, here we are back at the Discovery Station. And you wouldn't know it, I don't think to look at it, but believe it or not, a box like this is really important to control. And it seems to me that some of you probably have boxes there at school with you, and that would be great. While you're getting your boxes out, I wondered if Tom Crouch, who's with me right now, could tell about the box and why a box is so important to wing warping.
Sure, Sue. It was a box like this that first gave Wilbur Wright the notion of how you could control airplanes and roll, the sort of thing that Blake was talking about. He had an inner tube box like this, and he had just sold the bicycle inner tube, and he was just playing with the box like this while he was talking to the customer. And he noticed that when he went like this, he increased the lift on this side of the box, and he decreased it on this side of the box. So if these were the wings of an airplane, it would go like this. And that was called wing warping. That's what people eventually started calling it.
Wow, that is pretty neat. Well, you know, this box is great, but we have a terrific interactive here at the museum that will show you a little bit more about wing warping. And I wondered if we could go back over to Blake so that he could show us some of that. But first, I bet some of you have your boxes already at school, and I think maybe it might be time to get them out and practice wing warping. Now this boy, Tom and I worked for a long time to do this. And guys, if you'll pick up your boxes, what you want to do, use just your finger and your thumb, and you want to go back and forth, and you'll see how one side goes up and the other side goes down. This is how you do it. So I want to hear and see all of you wing warpers all around the country. Yeah, warping those boxes. Okay, Blake, you think you could show us that interactive now?
You know, I'm pretty sure we can because I'm here with Abe, right? And we've got three things right here. Like an Abe, we've got this thing on the bottom, right? And what that is, it's just a flat piece of wood. Can you lift that up and push that down? Yeah. Right? Yeah. Yeah. And well, can you describe for me how that's moving up and down?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's really easy to move, and it's like.
Yeah, so it's kind of easy to move up and down. Well, how about you move up to that box up there, right? And you're moving that up and down, right? And you're pushing pretty hard down on that, and you're pulling pretty hard up on that, right? And it doesn't look like it's moving a whole lot, right? Because the box is rigid. When you put four sides on it, like you can't bend it, right? But then if you go up to the top one, right? And we have that set up so that you can move it like in and out a little bit, right? Then can you describe for the people like what's happening to that box?
It's twisting. It's wing warping.
Yeah, it's twisting. It's wing warping. It's what?
It's really easy to move.
And it's really easy to move. So you can bend the box one way by twisting it, but you can't really bend it up and down, right? So if you think of the top surface of the box as one wing and the bottom surface of the box as the other wing, right? Then you don't want your wings to bend up and down, but you do kind of want them to twist, right? So Sue, does that answer your question?
Boy, it sure does, Blake. Thanks a lot. Well, we're back here at the Discovery Station, and we have a kite with us, but I think first we have a question, and that question is coming from Corey from California. Corey, what's your question?
Yeah, I would like to know what materials the Wright brothers used in the first Wright Flyer.
Boy, Corey wants to know what the materials were in the first Wright Flyer. Hey, Tom, what were those materials? I think it was pretty similar to the kite, wasn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to talk in a little more detail later on. But just to answer Corey's basic question, it was made out of fabric. The wings were covered with fabric, wood. The structure of the airplane was wood, and wire that you see bracing the wings together here.
Hey, wow, thanks, Tom. Do we have any other questions? We have Rebecca from Texas. Hey, Rebecca, what's your question?
How many sample wings did the Wright brothers make?
How many sample wings did the Wright brothers make? Boy, that's a really hard question. Peter, do you have an answer to that one?
Sure. The Wright brothers built several aircraft But to design their aircraft, they built something called a wind tunnel. And a wind tunnel is a really nifty device which you can test all kinds of little tiny wing shapes, little model wing shapes, before you have to go to all the trouble to build a whole big airplane. And they literally tested hundreds of different shapes of their wings to figure out which is the best one to fly their airplane.
Okay, here we are back at the kite, and we have the kite here, and this is something that the Wright brothers built right after they did the box experiment in the store. Wilbur came home and he was so excited about this idea that he thought it would be great to build a kite to test it. And so he put this together. And Tom, I know that you know a lot more about this kite than I do. What can you tell us about it?
Yes, so I've actually flown this one. And of course, this isn't the kite that the Wright brothers really built in 1899.
It's not?
No, this is a replica of it that a friend of mine built.
What do you mean by
so
replica?
That I could learn to fly. Well, it's just like the original. It's built out of the same kind of materials, but it's not the original.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about it, and we've got it kind of backwards here. This is the nose over here and the tail back here. But you can still see the most interesting thing about it, and that is that it warps its wings, just like the box. This is a kite that Wilbur built to sort of prove that a real flying machine, like this kite, something that would actually go in the air, could be controlled when you warp the wings. So Andy's going to help me here, and we'll show you how the wings of the kite warp just like the box. Now see, right now, Andy's corner is highest, and it's going to generate more lift. So the kite would go like this. And now, my corner is highest, and it's going to generate more lift than Andy's, which is lowest. So the kite's going to go zip like this. And it worked. So this was the first real Wright flying machine. A kite, just like kids make, a little simpler than that.
Yeah, wing warping kite. Well, Tex, I wondered if you could tell us what some of these things are on the kite. I mean, what is this that covers the wings?
Fabric.
Fabric, yeah. And Tom talked about this already. It's made out of?
Wood.
Wood. And the last part that it has on here?
Wire.
Wire. These are all the same things that are on the flyer as well. Yeah, and I wondered if we could go to Blake to find out a little bit more about what other things were actually on the flyer and maybe talk about those. Blake?
Thanks, Sue. And
Wait a minute, Blake. Your mom called and she said, now that you're with another adult, you can take your helmet off.
I am so glad because I'm starting to get helmet head, right? Oh, thanks. So, ooh, better.
All right.
All right. So, Peter, you and I were going to talk a little bit about the Wright Flyer. And email questions have been coming in for the whole show, right? We got one from Christine before, and she asked, what is a wind tunnel? And I think you answered that.
Well, we can talk a little bit more about that because that's really, really important. The Wright brothers built the airplane behind me and invented the airplane, but almost as important as that was the development of their wind tunnel, because a wind tunnel is what you use to actually design an airplane. Right. And wind tunnels today are used the same way the Wright brothers did.
Right, and the idea behind a wind tunnel is that it doesn't matter if the airplane moves through the air or if the air moves past the airplane, it's still the same effect?
The wing doesn't know whether it's moving or if the air is moving over it. It just reacts to the flow over the wing.
All right. So, so the Wright brothers were really, first-class aeronautical engineers.
They were the first aeronautical engineers. They invented aeronautical engineering.
Oh, well, how do you like that? All right. Well, it's time for Stump the Curator, Peter.
Well, I'm ready for you, Blake.
Okay. First question from Jasmine. All right. What do you think the Wright brothers would think about how we use their design now?
Well, the Wright brothers invented the first airplane, and that was 100 years ago. But if they walked into a modern engineering lab today, sure, they'd be surprised by some of the things that we've discovered since then. But in a lot of ways, the airplanes today are just like the first one behind me in the way it's controlled and the way it's designed. So the Wright brothers probably be pretty impressed that we're still doing it the way they invented it.
And that's like a really important point. Like for 100 years, right, airplanes are still controlled the same way as like just some of the pieces move around, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, right? Okay, so next question, Peter, right?
All right.
From Fred L. Wilson in elementary. Did Orville and Wilbur get hurt when they first flew the airplane?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
The Wright brothers were not crazy people who were just going to get in an airplane and jump off a cliff and hope that it flew. They built a series of gliders, and they would start just flying like a foot off the ground, just these short little flights, and tried to figure out how to fly the airplane. And they had a few bumps and bruises along the way, but basically they were smart. They took it one step at a time before they were able to fly this airplane. They taught themselves how to fly, so they were pilots.
Like, you know, like when kids learn how to ride their bicycle, right? They put training wheels on it, and they practice like that for a while, and then the training wheels come off, your airplane gets higher. How high did they fly on that first day?
With the flyer that you see behind me, they didn't fly much more than about 20 feet in the air.
So that's not really high at all. You know?
No, but the later airplanes that they built, they could fly several hundred feet in the air. So.
Ooh, good one. Yeah, all right, well, we got Hunter with a question. Hunter, do you have a question for us? You're from North Carolina.
How'd they make a engine at that time?
Ooh, how did they make an engine at that time? And that's a pretty important part, too, on this flyer.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, the part of the problem was control, which you talked about earlier. But the other big part was to make the engine, to make power. And there's a really interesting aspect of this engine. You know, today we have this material called aluminum, and it's used in pots and pans, and it's a big part of our lives. But at the time of the Wright brothers, it was a new material. And part of the engine, what we call the crankcase, which is basically the box that all the parts of the engine go in, was made out of cast aluminum. And that's the first time that was ever done. And that's really important for the history of airplanes because aluminum was just part of the whole history of flight.
Yeah, because, you know, because it's so light, and it's like, because if they tried to put an iron one on there.
Oh, well, that's the chief thing that an aeronautical engineer is their enemy, is weight. You want to keep the airplane as light as possible.
All right, so we have another phone question. We've got a phone question from, who's the phone question from? Bill. Bill from North Carolina. What's your question while I'm here with Peter?
What was the first airplane built with?
What was the first airplane built with?
Yes.
So, that's a good question. So let's talk a little bit about the materials that the airplane's made out of. Later on, we're going to talk about, you know, like really the biggest material you see on it is the cloth. But otherwise, you know, it's got all sorts of stuff. We talked about, you know, we'll talk about the cloth later. We talked about the aluminum. What else is this airplane made out of?
Well, most of it's made out of wood. Today we think of airplanes made out of metal, but in these early days, wood was the construction material, and you see the fabric covering on the airplane, but underneath all that fabric is a very intricate wooden structure that makes the shape of the wing, makes the shape of the control surfaces, and then that's all tied together with wire bracing, thin wire bracing to keep all the parts together.
All right. So, and we were talking about, you know, the control on this before too, right? So we know that the airplane was made out of cloth and wood and wire and aluminum, and then there's a person inside it. But the person inside the airplane, we call them the pilot. And how did the pilots control this airplane? Because we were talking about pitch, roll, and yaw before.
All right. We've got three parts of the airplane we need to control: the pitch, yaw, and roll. Blake likes to say the word yaw a lot, so that's why he focuses on yaw all the time. But they're equally important. Well, to fly up and down, to climb and descent,
to
pitch, very good. Not pitch a ball, but to pitch your airplane. You need something called the elevator, and that's that little thing in the front that looks like a small set of wings. And the pilot could control that and tilt it up to go up and tilt it down to go down. And if you look at the pilot's left hand, he's got a little lever that he can move that back and forth.
Okay.
Then we have to worry about rolling the airplane and controlling the wing warping. Well, if you look carefully on the airplane, you'll see this little cradle. It's called a hip cradle that the pilot's laying in. He's not just relaxing on the airplane. That's how he flies it. And he swings his hip from side to side. And I know you like to swing your hips.
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out how the pilot would control it. So and the stick was in their left hand.
Left hand.
Right? And their left hand would go forward and backwards.
That's
right?
for up and down?
For up and down. Forward and backward for up and down. But at the same time, if they want to go side to side, then they're going from like this.
Well, they weren't flailing their arms like that,
No?
Blake, but
Like
they
that?
were moving their hips from side to side.
Yeah. And did they do anything with their feet? Because I'm ready to dance.
Well, I'm trying to keep in control of Blake here. He's may need to put his helmet back on here any moment. But he just shifted his hips from side to side, and that controlled the wing warping and the rudder on the back.
Oh, so it sounds pretty complicated. And how is it that like pilots control airplanes today? Because they don't lie in it.
They don't lie in it. They sit in a chair, and they have a control wheel or a control stick, but it's the same controls that the Wright brothers had. They're just connected in different ways, but it still has the twisting motion. Today we use things called ailerons, which are flapping surfaces on the wings, but same idea.
Okay.
We still have elevators, still have rudders, and they're all connected to the pilot's controls.
Yeah, and we know while we've been talking, a call came in from Michigan, right? And Deannica, what part of Michigan are you from? Are you from like this part or like from higher up?
I'm from Warren.
So that's right around, there. All right, so Deannica, what's your question?
I wanted to know how many airplanes the Wright brothers had to make before they got the one that flew on Kitty Hawk.
Ooh, how many airplanes did the Wright brothers have to make before they got to this one? Go.
Excellent question, because most people think the Wright brothers just built this one airplane and flew, and that's not the case. They started in 1899, 4 years earlier, and they built a small little kite that Tom and Sue were showing you earlier, and then they built a series of gliders, and a glider is an airplane, just doesn't have a motor on it. They built one in 1900, 1901, and 1902, and they did that to design the airplane, to learn how to fly, to make all the controls that they needed, and then finally they were ready to go. In 1903, they built the airplane that you see behind me.
So it was a long process. All right.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to go talk to Tom, but we're going to do a little stuff about Bernoulli's principle, but I'm going to leave you with the question from Morgan from North Carolina. Morgan, what's your question?
How does the bike work?
Oh, yeah. How does the bike work? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, how does a bike work?
Well,
and how does it relate to the airplane?
The bicycles are very important to the invention of the airplane. At first glance, you might think, well, what does a bicycle and an airplane have to do with one another? But if you think about it, a bicycle is very unstable. It teeters and totters and so forth, but you can control it really well if you know how to ride a bike. And the airplane's the same thing. It's kind of unstable, but if you have a good control system like the one that the Wright brothers invented, you can keep it stable in flight, and that's exactly what they did. So bicycles are very important to the idea of the airplane. I think we'll turn it over now to Tom, and he's going to tell you some really cool stuff about how lift happens. How does an airplane generate lift and make it go up?
Hey, welcome back.
All right,
I
Tom.
have Blake here,
Yeah, 'cause,
Kendra, and Abe. And Kendra, Abe, I want to ask you, what do you think is the most important part of an airplane?
The wings,
Why do you think that?
because without those, they couldn't keep up in the air.
That's right. Airplanes are about flying, and without wings, you can't fly, can you? So we're going to say a little something about wings, Blake, right?
A little something about wings, and this is a good, because a lot of people who signed up for this field trip, right? You were told it's like you have these little strips of paper in front of you. So we're going to pass these out. Everybody gets a strip of paper. Pick them up. And Tom, why do we have this fancy scientific equipment with us?
Well, we're going to tell you something about why a wing works. And we're going to start with a little demonstration here. We're going to ask you to put the piece of paper right in your lower lip and blow over it. And when you do that, Abe, what happened?
It goes up
Why do you think that happens?
because you're blowing air across it, and because you're blowing air across it, and faster moving air has less pressure. So
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
Kendra, who came up with that idea, do you know?
someone Bernoulli.
Bernoulli, yeah.
Daniel Bernoulli.
Daniel Bernoulli. And Daniel Bernoulli was a Swiss mathematician who lived in the 1700s. This is one of the reasons that people couldn't design an airplane earlier than really the 1900s, because nobody had figured out yet, like, well, how did it get up into the air? And when Daniel Bernoulli described it, right, well, then people put two and two together, and that's when they started coming up with the wing shapes, right? So Tom, like, what does this have to do with the wings?
Well, let's look at this, Blake. What's this, Kendra, do you think?
A wing?
Yeah, this is a modern wing. When you look at the Wright Brothers airplane, you see a wing that's a wooden structure covered with fabric. This is a metal structure, and it's covered with metal on top. So it's modern and tougher and stiffer than the Wright Brothers wing and all that. But what can you tell me about it, Abe? When you look at it, what do you notice about it?
It's an airfoil.
And it's an airfoil, exactly. It's bigger on top and flatter on the bottom. And as you suggested a few minutes ago, what this means is that air is going to move faster over the top than over the bottom. And when that happens, the pressure over the top drops, and the pressure underneath is higher, and the wing generates lift. That's not quite the whole story, but that's a lot of why a wing works.
Yeah, so wings have this shape, right, to help them to fly, right? The curved top and sort of the flat bottom, right? And then you get that higher pressure underneath, and the higher pressure pushes your airplane up, and it takes your airplane with it. And like Tom said, there's more to the story, but this explains a lot of it, doesn't it,
It does
Tom?
indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, a question came in, right? Somebody from North Carolina, Harderus. Harderus, what's your question while we're here? Harderus from North Carolina, are you there?
Hello?
Harderus,
Hello?
what's your question?
No, it's like I think we lost Harderus, you know, and that's part of the technology. Yeah, but you know, we got people waiting in the wings, so that means
Okay.
Haley from Texas is up. Haley, do you have a question?
Yes, how old were the Wright brothers when they flew their first plane?
Oh, how old were the Wright brothers when they flew the first plane? So how old were they in 1903, Tom?
Well, when they first became interested in flight in 1899, 1900, right in then, Wilbur was just over 30, and he was almost 4 years older than his brother, or Orville, Wilbur rather, was almost 4 years older than his younger brother, Wilbur. So just over 30, just under 30.
All right. Yeah, so no, while you've been talking, Marissa from Florida also came up with a question. Marissa, what's your question for us?
Did their father ever fly the airplane?
Did their father ever fly the airplane?
The question is, yeah, did their father ever fly the airplane? Their father was very much a part of what they did, and he was very important to them. But he wasn't a pilot, so he never actually flew the airplane himself. But they did give their father rides on the airplane. In fact, Wilbur and Orville, when they first began this, had promised their father that they wouldn't fly together. But one time, after they had become sort of famous, at their flying field in Huffman Prairie near Dayton, Ohio, they flew together one time, and they flew their father the same day. And there's a great story about that. Orville flew his father, was the pilot when his father went up. And Orville said that as they were circling over the field, his father leaned over to him and whispered in his ear, "Higher, Orville, higher."
All right, so, you know, and we also have another question from Adrian in North Carolina. Adrian, what's your question?
How many people fit on the plane?
Well, the question is, Adrian's question is, how many people fit on the plane? And on the first airplane, Adrian, the world's first airplane that we have here in the exhibit, only one person fits on the airplane, just the pilot. But when the Wright brothers had perfected their machine and were selling it, everybody wanted at least two people to fly, the pilot and a passenger. So by 1908, when the Wright brothers began to demonstrate their airplane to the public, they could carry two people. And it wasn't long before they were carrying more than that.
Yeah. All right, thanks, Tom. All right, well then, like something else that people have been told to wait for is like, well, a lot of you have pieces of paper, right, and you've got your scissors, right? So we're going to actually make some airplanes, but these are not like the regular airplanes that you know, like most people. Yeah, these are pretty special, right? So here's what you do, right? You take the top of one side and you fold it down, right? Real quick. Doesn't have to be perfect. Right, because the first time the Wright brothers built, you know, their gliders, right, they weren't perfect, right? Then you take it and you fold it over again, right? And then just for good measure, because good things come in threes, you fold it over one more time, and you're going to get something which looks like this, right? And then what you do is you just take that, you fold it in half, right? And that's not even your airplane yet, right? Because now you get your scissors, right? Take your scissors, right, and you just start cutting out this shape, right? And watch my scissors while I do it. Right.
You know, this is important, like toys, things that kids play with.
I love
Kites,
toys.
Paper airplanes, the little bat. Those are important in technology and innovation. They help people understand how things work.
Yes, right, so you'll get this shape, right? So it's kind of like making a snowflake. You fold the papers over and you cut it, and that means you get one side is the same as the other side. Right, and that's important for the airplanes too, right? Because if one side was bigger, then then you would.
Airplanes have to be balanced.
They have to be balanced, right? So you have this, and then you take this and you kind of fold it down, right, like that.
Yours isn't real balanced here, Blake.
Yeah.
I want to see how well this flies.
Yeah, well, I think you'll be surprised, Tom, because you know I am a trained professional.
I know, I know.
So all right, we got the.
I have faith here.
You know, and you sort of flip it open a little bit. So you get this thing, right? And if it doesn't look exactly like that, it doesn't matter, right? Right? And then you just take that and like there's your airplane, right? So are we ready? You ready? Set, throw. Well, you know,
A trained professional.
A trained
indeed.
professional. Yeah, that's right. Right, and you know, and like an experimenting, right, with your paper and with your airplanes, with your scissors and the right shape, right? Because that's what the Wright brothers did. They experimented.
That's what makes this fun.
And,
This
yeah.
is experimenting to see how good an airplane you can make yourself out of paper.
Right. So, you know, we made this one out of paper, right? Paper is one material you can make an airplane out of. We just made paper airplanes. So Sue's going to talk a little bit more about some of the other materials that the Wright brothers used. Sue?
Hey, thanks, Blake. We're back here at the Discovery Station. We've had an email question come in from Frank. How many different kinds of material did they, I assume, the Wright brothers, test for the wings? The Wright brothers tested not only a couple different kinds of materials, but they did some things to it as well. For example, on the kite, they put shellac on the material, and that made it a little stiffer. Another time, when they went to Kitty Hawk, they tried sateen, which was a kind of French fabric. But they finally settled on something completely different, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. Actually, Andy's with me, and so is Manal, and I wanted Andy to describe this material to you. Now, some of you have seen pictures of this before. Andy, could you tell us what your material feels like?
It's stretchy.
All right, anything else?
It's soft.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really thick.
Really thick, yeah.
And I know another thing, the fact that this polyester has never been invented yet.
Really? Okay. Well, let's talk to Manal. What's your fabric like?
My fabric is not very stretchy, and when you hold it up to the light, you can't see through it.
Okay.
And
would it make a good napkin?
It feels like a towel.
More like a towel. Okay. Well, I have one more piece of fabric with me, and it's this one. This is really lightweight. It really seems flimsy, and, well, if you hold it up to the light, you can almost see through it. It hardly seems appropriate. But let's talk about the different fabrics that we've looked at. The one that Andy had is actually something called
Polyester or something?
Polyester. And when the Wright brothers were making planes, polyester hadn't even been thought of. So it wasn't around. They couldn't have used that one. Manal, what about your fabric? Can you tell them what it is?
I think it's denim.
It is denim. And denim was around when the Wright brothers were living and experimenting with their planes. But denim is too heavy and probably would have been too expensive. Believe it or not, the right material, oh, I just got it. The right material turns out to be muslin. Yeah, this lightweight, inexpensive fabric. So the Wright brothers, though, didn't think of material the same way that other people did either. Peter, can you tell us a little bit about what the Wright brothers did with the muslin material on this plane?
Sure. The Wright brothers were pretty clever. Not only were they interested in using muslin because it was lightweight and it had a very tight weave to it so the air wouldn't pass through it, but the way that they put it on the airplane is very, very important. If you pull the fabric on one direction, you'll get it to stretch a lot more than if you pull it on the other direction. And the Wright brothers remembered wanted wings that were stiff along the length of the wing, but flexible so they could twist them. So they put the fabric on in such a way that when they twisted it, it was in the direction that the fabric was much stretchier. So that was really a clever idea to use the fabric as part of the structure of the airplane. The Wright brothers were also very clever in the way that they sewed on the fabric. If you look at the airplane very carefully, you'll see that the stitches between the sections of the fabric are on an angle. They're on a 45-degree angle. They're not exactly parallel to the structure of the wing. And that's a very clear illustration of the fact that they were sewing it on an angle, what we call the bias, which means sewing it on that angle where the fabric is much more stretchy. So if you look at that, you can see it.
I understand we have Mark from Indiana who's on the phone with a question. Mark, North Carolina. What's your question, Mark?
Hey, I was wondering if the people or the Wright brothers invented the helicopter or if it evolved from the airplane.
Wow, that's an amazing question. Rotary wings. I don't feel prepared to take that one at all. Peter, what can you tell us about that?
the little helicopter toy that the Wright brothers got from their father in 1878 was what we call a vertical flight vehicle, a helicopter. But the Wright brothers really went in a different direction. They went in what we call the fixed wing, or the airplane configuration, and the helicopter is really quite a different thing. So the Wright brothers invented the airplane, but not the helicopter. But inventing the airplane was a pretty good thing, too.
All right, we have another question. This is Aaron from North Carolina. Aaron, what's your question?
My question?
Yes, Aaron.
My question is, how did they get when they got the plane up in the air, how did they control how fast it went, and how did they control it when they got ready to slow it down and come down and land it?
Aaron wants to know how to control the plane as far as how fast they could make it go and how they slowed it down. And boy, that's another tricky question. I'm glad Peter's here because I don't have a clue. Peter, how did they do that?
Well, in these very early days of flying, the airplanes were flying very, very slowly, and it was pretty much just one speed. They couldn't really control the speed of the engine at all. They would start the engine, and they would rev it up to full speed. They would take off on the airplane, and they would fly as well as they could, and then they would, in fact, shut the engine off after they landed to shut off the engine and start over again. So the airplane really couldn't control its speed very well at all. It just was basically flying or not flying.
We have another question. This is Levon from New York. Levon, what's your question? Levon, are you there? I can hardly hear you.
Did the Wright brothers have any brothers or sisters, and were they married? And who invented the first helicopter?
Wait a minute, that's more than one question. The Wright brothers did have other brothers and sisters. They had two older brothers. And I bet Manal, do you know the names of the older brothers?
Ruslan and Lauren.
Yeah, Ruslan and Lauren. And they also had a sister, Katherine, as well. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, I can't hear that one.
Who invented the first helicopter?
Who invented the first helicopter? Wow, I barely know about slow flights, so helicopters are way out of my range. Hey, Peter, I'm tossing this one back to you.
All right, well, I've got this one, too, for you, Sue. There were a number of people who were working on the helicopter, what we call vertical flight capability, in this early period. But the person who's really credited with really solving the problem was a Russian experimenter by the name of Igor Sikorsky. And Igor started by building airplanes not too long after the Wright brothers flew, and then he came to the United States and became an American citizen, and in the 1920s and 1930s was working hard on the helicopter, and about that time he was able to make the first successful helicopter flight. So the inventor of the helicopter is Igor Sikorsky. Sam, what's your question?
Where did the Wright brothers get the money to pay for building their airplanes?
That's a good question, Sam. Where did the Wright brothers get the money to fund all of this research? Well, you know, they had a bicycle shop, as we all know, and that was their business. That's how they earned a living. And they were able to fund all of their aeronautical experiments, the trips to Kitty Hawk, the materials for the airplane. Everything came out of the profits of their bicycle shop. And in the 4 years that they worked on the airplane, they spent only $1,000 on their research. So that's pretty good. $1,000 for an airplane that changed the whole world. Alex, what's your question?
Hello?
Hello, Alex.
Yes, I'd like to know if you can make an airplane like they did today, if they still have the same materials and stuff.
Can you make an airplane like the Wright brothers did today? Well, in fact, there are a number of groups around the United States today who are trying to build flying reproductions of the Wright brothers airplane in honor of the 100th anniversary of flight. And in fact, on December 17th, 2003, 100 years to the moment after the Wright brothers made their first flight, a group is going to try to fly an exact reproduction of the 1903 flyer in the exact same spot at the exact same time 100 years later. Kyle, what's on your mind? Not a lot, it seems.
My question is, could the Wright brothers plane spiral or do flips?
Did the Wright brothers plane spiral or do flips? Well, the experimental airplane, the first one, the 1903 airplane, was really just to test their idea. So it just made some straight line flights. But later on, after they perfected their airplane, they were able to make figures of eights and turns and all kinds of things. And even later than that, we had pilots who started to do exhibitions in airplanes. They would be stunt pilots, and they would do loops and rolls and spins. So it started out with just some straight flights, but then evolved into all kinds of aerobatics. Sue, maybe you'd like to take it from here.
Okay, great. We're going to talk a little bit about propulsion at this point. And if you look down here on the Discovery Station, I have some pieces of, well, I'm not sure. It might be best if we have somebody put it together. Abe is with me. And Abe, could you put that together real fast? Let's see if we can find out what it is. Boy, it's starting to look like, hey, Tex, what is it? Can you tell?
A wing.
You might want to talk into your microphone.
A wing.
It looks like a wing, doesn't it? Yeah. You may have remembered when Blake talked about wings, you've got that special airfoil shape. It's rounded on the top, flat on the bottom, and that's exactly what you have with this wing. But I'm going to show you something that's truly amazing, because this wing actually belongs to this. Hey, is this a wing? Hey, what do you think?
It's a propeller.
No way, a propeller? Are you sure? But you just told me that it was a wing. Is it a wing or a propeller?
It's both.
It's both. And that's something that the Wright brothers thought of. They thought that a propeller was also a wing. And when they built the propellers for their plane, they made them to look more like wings. In fact, they did make them look like wings. Today, propellers are made the same way. Now, with this propeller, it's got, maybe 15, 20 pieces of wood that are layered together and glued. The Wright brothers didn't use nearly that many. They only used about 2 pieces of wood, and then they hand-carved it to be their propeller. So that's what it looked like. And you can see the propeller now on the back of the plane. It may appear silver, but the Wright brothers wanted to make the propeller stronger. So they painted it with shellac that had aluminum suspended in it, and that helped to give it a little extra strength. And you can see here, it doesn't look like it worked too well. It looks like there are a couple of holes in that propeller. All right. Now, this is the finished propeller, and this is a propeller that is still used today. This is one that the military uses for unmanned aircraft called drones, and it's really lightweight. In fact, I'm going to hand this to my friend Tex here. Yeah, how does that feel?
Light.
Really lightweight, doesn't it? But it's really strong. And when you look at it, you can see different lines in here, and the different lines are the different layers of glue. Not like the rings of a tree. These are the different sections of wood that have been glued together to make this propeller. And again, that is something that the Wright brothers thought of. You can say they thought of it sort of out of the box, or the wing warping box, if you think about it. Yeah. So right now, we would like to find out a little bit more about, why the Wright brothers decided to go to Kitty Hawk. And so let's see if we can go to them and find out.
So we needed a place to practice, to experiment, a place to learn how to ride our untrained flying horse.
Now, there are 2 ways of learning how to ride a fractious horse. The first is to get on him and learn by actual practice how each motion and trick might be best met. The other is to sit on a fence and watch the beast a while, then retire to the house and at leisure figure out how to overcome his jumps and kicks. The latter system is the safest, but the former, on the whole, turns out the larger proportion of good riders. It is very much the same in learning how to ride a flying machine.
So we wrote to the Federal Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C. to identify places appropriate for our flying experiments. Areas with steady wind, open spaces devoid of trees, dense population, or hilly terrain.
And someplace with plenty of sand for soft landings. Kitty Hawk seemed to fit the bill.
Oh, Kitty Hawk has plenty of sand, all right. burying our workshop from one summer to the next. When we first got here 3 years ago, we had to carry our drinking water about 1,000 feet over the sand just to get to camp.
And drag our first glider nearly 4 miles south of camp to the dunes and 100 feet up the side of Big Kill Devil Hill.
That first year, there were so few supplies and so little fresh drinking water that we were sometimes reduced to eating spoonfuls of condensed milk out of a can. It makes a pretty good dessert that way. The only things that really seem to thrive out here are bed bugs, mosquitoes, and wood ticks. But I'll tell you, the sunsets here are the prettiest I've ever seen. The clouds light up in colors, deep blue, fringed in gold.
Kitty Hawk proved to be a splendid place to observe soaring flight. Nearly 100 eagles, ospreys, buzzards, and hawks live within a half mile of camp.
And mosquitoes, Will. Don't forget the mosquitoes. 2 years ago, when we first made camp at Big Kill Devil Hill, they were the worst. And once, the swarm of mosquitoes came in a mighty cloud, almost darkening the sun. They chewed us clear through our underwear and our socks.
But an army of mosquitoes couldn't get in the way of our experiments. We took photographs to document our progress. That way, the excitement of our experiments did not cease with the breakup of camp each year. In the dark room back home in Dayton, we passed moments as thrilling as any in the field when the image begins to appear on the plate and we are unsure whether we have a picture of a flying machine
or merely a patch of open sky. This year we were determined not to leave until we had tried out our new machine. But it's getting so close to Christmas.
We're running out of time. Of course, Sundays we keep the Sabbath.
So we prayed last Sunday that the weather would be clear and windy on Monday.
It was clear, but the wind was very light. I won the coin toss, so I attempted to fly on Monday. The power was ample, and had I not made an error in judgment due to lack of experience with this machine, it would have flown beautifully. After making some repairs, we were ready to try again today, Thursday, December 17th.
It was my turn to fly, and a biting cold 27-mile-an-hour wind would not deter us.
Our junction railroad worked perfectly and gave us a good start every time. The 60 feet of wooden 2x4 we used to launch our machine cost us $4. Overall, we spent just $1,000 over 4 years, while Mr. Langley of the Smithsonian spent nearly $50,000 on his aeronautical experiments.
And his doesn't work! The first flight lasted only 12 seconds, but it was the first in the history of the world in which a machine carrying a man raised itself by its own power into the air, soared forward in full flight without a reduction in speed, and then landed at a point as high as that from which it started. It's hard for me to put into words how I feel about this moment. To have solved this puzzle.
Opening up new opportunities, new puzzles.
We must wire Father and Katherine immediately.
Well, Kendra and Manal and I are back to sort of close things up here and just sum things up. Kendra, let me ask you, what was the date of the first flight?
December 17th, 1903.
That's right, December 17th, 1903. And Manal, how many flights did they make that day?
4.
They made 4 flights. The first one was only 120 feet in 12 seconds. But the last one, and here's an animation that's going to show us something about that last flight, was 852 feet and 59 seconds. And that's longer than you think. If you watch the airplane move across the screen here, it's in the air a real long time. You know, the Wright brothers didn't have any wheels on their plane. They took off from a monorail track and into the air, and off they went. What do you think, Kendra? Would you like to fly the Wright airplane?
Yeah.
Would you?
I mean, it'd be scary, but it'd be fun.
Manal, you think it would be tough?
I think it'd be fun, but it'd be dangerous, and you'd be taking a lot of chances.
Well, as Peter said, somebody's going to try to do it this December 17th on the 100th anniversary.
All right, thanks, Tom. And I'm here with Jessica Sluice from Best Buy. And Jessica, we just wanted to take a little bit of an opportunity to thank you, because the Best Buy Children's Foundation is really what makes this whole program possible.
Well, you know, it's great to be able to be here and to be able to partner with Ball State University to bring the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum to all these kids across the country. So we're happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. And and we understand, it's like, you know, Best Buy's been doing something else really nice for the people who have been watching. Like, what have you got for the questions that we've been answering?
That's right, Blake. For people that have called in or emailed questions and who participated in the poster contest prior to the show, we have $25 Best Buy gift cards to give away.
Oh, sweet.
So I was just given the list of names, and we have Hunter from North Carolina, Corey from California, Rebecca in Texas, Jay from Indiana, Chelsea in Texas, Cody from Michigan, Marissa in Florida, Shannon also from Texas, Levon in New York, and Haley from Texas. So congratulations and thanks for participating in today's electronic field trip.
Jessica, that's really nice to you and Best Buy, right? So we thank you for coming today, but this is not the first electronic field trip that we're doing from the National Air and Space Museum. We're also doing one in April, right? And it's called The Future Takes Off, and we're going to broadcast it live again from the new Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center. And Jessica, I know you just went out there yesterday. Can you tell us what it looks like? Because I haven't even seen it yet.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's an enormous facility, and it has both commercial and military aircraft. And when it's finally complete, it will have 200 airplanes in total and helicopters. And it will include the Concorde and the space shuttle. So it's just enormous.
Yeah, it's like an enormous is right, you know, because like I understand like the Concorde's in it. So to walk from one end to the other, the Concorde takes up the whole floor.
Right.
You basically have to walk underneath it to get from one part of the building to the other.
There's planes everywhere. They're hanging from the ceiling. You have to walk underneath them from get to one end to the other. So it's really cool.
And that's coming up in April. So if you like what we did today, we've also got that one in April. But in February, we also have live from Jupiter. Oh, Jupiter, Florida. Yeah, yeah, Jeff Arnett, right, is going to talk a little bit about the electronic field trip on baseball, right? Jeff, what do you have to say about what's coming up?
Blake and Jessica, thank you very much. We're joining you today from spectacular Jupiter, Florida. We're here at Roger Dean Stadium, which, by the way, is the spring training home of the National League champion Florida Marlins, who take on the New York Yankees in the third game of the World Series tonight. But there's another series that we want to tell you about, as Blake just mentioned. That's the next electronic field trip, which will be February the 10th from right here at Roger Dean Stadium. Now, a lot is going on. We're going to show you a video of some things that you'll see in the electronic field trip in February, which is called Fastball, Flips, and Physics. And it will be co-hosted by none other than Hall of Fame shortstop Ozzie Smith. Ozzie's going to be right here with us at Roger Dean Stadium. And we're going to be teaching you all about science and physics, looking at all the different things that go on in the game of baseball. We're seeing some exciting segments from some exciting moments in Major League history. We're going to be bringing all of those into play in the field trip in February as we teach you some very important principles. Now, as we come out of the Independence Middle School here in Jupiter, Florida, Roger Dean Stadium, we're doing a lot of the same things that we'll be doing during the field trip in February. They're running the bases, they're pitching from the mound, and joining me is Mike Dodrell. Mike is a science teacher. Mike's going to be with us in the program in February. Mike, tell us a little bit about what the students are doing, especially those that are out on the mound and those that are running the bases right now.
Okay. Well, the students running the bases are covering a certain distance in a certain amount of time, which is known as speed. If we add a direction to that, which second base is in the northerly direction from first base, then it would be a velocity. Speed and direction is a velocity. Now, on the pitcher's mound, they're doing the same thing with the ball. It's covering a distance in a certain amount of time, but the time is a lot shorter than the person running. So then the radar gun is used, and that way we can get a more accurate time.
So it measures velocity.
Yes, it does.
Okay, now we fired up the fly ball machine, also known as the Ponza Hummer, here next to me. Rava from Independence Middle School is shooting fly balls out to the guys in the outfield. Talk a little bit about projectile motion as well.
Okay, projectile motion, the Ponza Hummer machine is accelerating the ball in two directions, a horizontal direction and a vertical direction. And that then is a projectile. After it leaves the machine, it's no longer accelerated by the machine, just the acceleration due to gravity is affecting it. So as it reaches a height, then it will come down due to gravity.
Looks like Robbie the Redbird from the Palm Beach Cardinals and Hamilton R. Head from the Jupiter Hammerheads, which are the farm teams for the Cardinals and the Marlins, both of which train here at Roger Dean Stadium. They're having a little bit of trouble with those fly balls, so let's talk about what it takes to project something. And of course, in the game of baseball, that would be a bat. Talk to us about the sweet spot.
The sweet spot. The sweet spot is otherwise known as a node. And what the node does There's actually one in the end of the bat and one at the handle. And when you hit or contact the ball on the bat in the sweet spot, then it doesn't transfer as much energy to your hands. Now, if you get off of that node, you can actually feel that energy be transferred to your hands, and that's why your hands sting if you miss the node.
Okay, otherwise known as the center of percussion. So there's a lot of physics principles that we're going to bring into play during our field trip in February. This ball that Mr. Donville was using, it's actually a special baseball from the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., and it commemorates the 100th anniversary of the first flight by the Wright Flyer that you've been enjoying the stories about in the field trip today. I'm going to hand this to Reva, and we're going to launch it back to everybody there in the Smithsonian, because I understand that Jessica has a very important announcement that she would like to make. So as Reva drops this baseball into the Ponza Hummer, Jessica and Blake, we're going to throw it back to you in Washington, D.C. Thanks for letting us join you.
Yeah. Jeff, thank you very much. Oh, there goes that baseball, and I think you broke a case, right? So next time, aim a little bit lower so we can catch that thing. And Jessica, as if the Best Buy Children's Foundation isn't doing enough, by supporting, Ball State and Insight and the National Air and Space Museum, and like to do these field trips, and then with the gift cards, there's something else that Best Buy is announcing today, and what's that?
That's right, Blake. Best Buy would like to announce that the Best Buy Children's Foundation is launching a new program called Teach, which will award a total of $3 million to schools across the country this year for them integrating technology into their curriculum creatively. And the grants are going to be given out to 1,200 schools for $2,500 each. And information and applications are available online at bestbuy.com under Community Relations. So go online today and get your application.
All right, well, that's excellent. Jessica, thank you very much, right? And thank all of you for watching, right? And let's thank Tom Crouch and Sue Davis and Peter Jacob, and Ball State, the Smithsonian, the National Air and Space Museum, the Insight Teachers College, especially all our people who are helping out, like Kendra, Manal, Tex, Abe, and one person's missing, and that's Andy. And Andy's going to take us out of here with a little bit of music. So thank you very much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye, everybody.